Hey there YouTubers, this is Amberola1B presenting my next video project for the YouTube presentation now that the Markel Playmaster is all more or less squared away and I've made my final videos on it. This is a 1932 Victor Capehart, which was given to me by the same person who gave me the Markel Playmaster. His name is Kevin Frattalone, and he fixes old tube radios for a living. Now I traded him my Victor victrola for this machine. He's got the rest of the machine at his house. He's got the cabinet, the loudspeaker, and I think part of the power supply which powers the whole unit up, because I can't run this unit yet because I have nothing to plug it into, and I think the electrical cord and something else that goes with it is still at his house. Now, Kevin and I have been working on restoring this machine, and he replaced all the capacitors in the tuner. This is basically just an AM tuner. Now it's hard to get this whole thing in my camera, but you can see the tuning part works. He recapped it all, and I'm not sure if this is the volume control or the tone control up here and what this is, because like I said, he's got the cabinet at his house and it's probably got, you know, labels on the wooden part of the cabinet where this goes as to what each function is. And this is the main power amplifier, and it's got the little Capehart plate there. I think the camera can pretty much pick up the serial number, type, volts, and cycles, what's, you know, stamped into those little areas there. And this is part of the record flipper, and this is activated by this little lever being moved out of the way, and then this little flipper arm just moves out in its resting position out of the way, and then when it's going to turn a record over to play the other side, then it just comes into the center here and then cradles the record as it's being flipped. Now, I don't know what you call this part here, whether it's the hopper or what, but this is the part that actually flips the whole record up when it's either going to turn it over or put it back in the stack to be put away while it's being ready to play the next record. Here's the main drive motor, which is bolted down to the bottom of the cabinet, and as you can see, it's got a series of couplings and a shaft here which go from the motor to the underside of the record changer itself, and they all couple together to drive the turntable and to make all the functions of the record changer work. Okay, now I've removed the shaft and all the couplings from the drive motor, and at some point in this machine's life, somebody, one of the owners, took this apart and was servicing it, or something was happening to it, because this coupling was separated from this round leather disc, and originally the coupling and this metal friction disc here, this second one here, was riveted to this piece of leather, and somehow the piece of leather remained riveted to the friction disc. The original rivets are still intact, but it was somehow torn off or removed from this coupling, and they were supposed to remain intact in order to drive the whole motor and the turntable. So what happened was, like I said, this piece of leather was still attached here, and the original owner, or one of the original owners, didn't either know how it went back together or misplaced the parts, or thought they did anyway. And what they did was they put a bead of epoxy around the outside of these two friction discs and this piece of friction leather, and they put it around the whole outside of it. And when I got the machine home and looked at it, I didn't know if it originally was supposed to be there or not. And then my friend Kevin said no, it wasn't supposed to, and that the guy had just jury-rigged a repair to keep it all together. And how he kept this coupling on this piece of leather was the original rivets were still inside here in each point of the coupling, and the rivets stuck through, and thus the piece of leather could go through the holes to the rivets through the holes that were still in the leather, and it would sit there and it would still move. But what I did was I drilled out the rivets, and even though the screws don't match, what I did was I attached the whole assembly with a screw, a nut, and a washer. I actually found the original C-ring that held this shaft on this whole assembly inside here, so the C-ring and the washer were still there. So when I took the piece apart to clean it, degrease it, and try to reassemble it, I backed off on these locking nuts, and because this whole assembly here is under pressure by this really heavy-duty spring, and I reassembled it, so I backed off the locking nuts, put the whole assembly together minus this coupling, and through the leather washer here, I attached the washer, the metal washer, and the C-ring to this shaft, which went through these two friction discs. And then my friend Kevin helped me hold the coupling, and so I could put the screws on and put the washer and the nut on the other side, because I was trying to do this by myself, and it was almost impossible because I couldn't hold the screw on there and put the washer and the nut on at the same time. So he held it for me while I put the nut and the washer on, and then worked the screw with a small screwdriver to attach it. And in fact, I don't know if you can really see it in there, but let me get my little screwdriver here. Right in here, there's the washer, right there, and in front of it is barely visible the C-ring, because you can see a groove scored at the very bottom of this whole shaft. And right in that groove is where that little C-ring was supposed to go. And so now it's held together properly. And then what I did was I just tightened down on these lock nuts to apply pressure to this spring, to apply a lot of pressure to the friction disc, the leather friction disc that's in between these two metal discs, so that there's no slippage while the machine is in operation. And this piece of leather apparently is supposed to be flexible like that, I guess, to account for irregularities when it's turning the mechanism or whatever, but it's supposed to be that way. So that's not a fault of me repairing it. But I'm surprised this thing ran at all with the rivets that were sticking through the original holes here and going through this leather washer here. I guess just holding it in place still allowed the mechanism to turn, and that the rivets wouldn't pop out of the holes of that piece of leather. Here we see the bed plate with the mechanism underneath. Now I have to repair the turntable felt. I tried removing some of the felt, but this was all I was able to take off, and the rest of it is stuck pretty fast. What I hate about these old machines that have turntable felt on them is that the felt usually gets destroyed by somebody running a needle across the felt and just scoring a groove in the felt, so that's why I'm going to replace it. But because I don't want to replace it with brand new felt, I was able to acquire some from one of the places where I work at, where they had some really old felt. And here I'll show you what some of it looks like. Now, if I choose a good portion of this old felt that isn't either marked up with stains or anything, you can see that it looks just exactly like the original old felt. And this is a big piece. So I'll be able to replace this worn out felt here with a new piece of aged felt. Now, the reason why I've got these eye bolts and these little locking rings on the turntable bed plate here is because I'm going to bring this machine out to my garage. I've already affixed 4 eye bolts to 2 of the ceiling rafters in my garage, and I'm going to attach chain to this so I can hang it vertically or at an angle so I can look at underneath it and degrease it, because I want to be able to hang it and have both my hands free so that I can use either toothbrushes and or paintbrushes to get all the gunk out from underneath this unit so that I can make it run properly again. I already took the motor apart and cleaned everything out, re-greased the little gearbox here, and got it running pretty smooth. Now all I want to do is plug it in, be able to plug it in once we get all the other components here, and listen to it run properly. Anyway, that's almost all the other components. Here's the original tone arm. My friend Kevin just kind of jury-rigged a little wire there so that he could play it again. He's got a makeshift cartridge in here. It's not the original cartridge, but he's got kind of a makeshift cartridge in there, kind of held in together with some sticky pads, little square sticky pads to build up the cartridge and to make it probably about the proper height to play records on this tone arm. But anyway, this is the original tone arm, and I'll have to degrease this too. And that's pretty much it. Let's see, I'll turn the light off. And that's the nameplate for the Capehart radio. And this is the nameplate on the bed plate of the record changer. I might even do a little video of me out in the garage degreasing the underside of it so you can see what it looks like. It's a little dark right now, so I don't think you can see. Well, let me turn on my light. It's kind of like what the underside of the record changer looks like. I'm not going to even attempt to take any of this apart because everything has to be timed on this machine and worked properly. Now, the one thing I will show you when I get it out to the garage, this here is part of a repair. Somebody during this machine's life, and you can see like right there, there is a crack in the casting. Somebody jury-rigged this to put it back together, and actually the repair isn't all that bad, but somebody put 4 bolts there and 2 pieces of bent metal to hold the underside of this broken casting together to hold the worm gear that drives the turntable shaft. And I'll show you that when I get it out in the garage and hung up in the air. Anyway, oh yeah, there's one other thing I want to show you. This machine was apparently also geared to run not only 78s but 33 1/3. And this machine, my friend said, was made in 1932. So I don't know if it was made to run the RCA Victor 10-inch transcription records that they made that ran 33 1/3 RPM or what. But he also claims that it may have been put there because of slow-speed language records that were being developed back then. But there is no cartridge in this machine that'll play 33s, but it was actually geared to play 33 1/3 RPM records. Now here we have the little switch plate with the lever repeat records to play only one side and to play both sides. Anyway, that's about all for this video, and I will see you out in the garage when I hang this bed plate up, and then I'll show it being degreased. Well, here I am out in the garage with the record changer hung from the rafters with some fairly strong chain that will hold up to 325 pounds. So I don't have to be afraid of this machine coming down on me. Now, here, as you can see, is the homemade repair that I was talking about. These two strips of metal held in by 4 bolts are the repair that was made when this machine somehow took a tumble sometime in its life and broke the bottom of the casting that held the turntable shaft together. And I don't know if it's going to come out very clearly if I turn on my light. Maybe it'll show it a little better. Right there is the brake, right here. And it was held together by those 4 bolts and these 2 pieces of metal and this little, if I can find it, I don't know why my camera's not locating where it is, this little support right here, which was screwed to the bottom of the casting. But this is the underside of the record changer, and I'm about to get busy and do a little degreasing on this machine and get it ready to sometime soon be put back in operation. Now, to catch all the WD-40 and the grease, I've spread out this drop cloth down here. I'm going to try to show a little bit of the video of me degreasing this machine to see how it comes out. But before I do that, I'm just going to try a little spot just to see how it works out, to make sure that this is going to be a productive video. Okay, I was going to use WD-40 to try to degrease this, thinking that it might be a little better than lacquer thinner, but the WD-40 was only making a big mess and was staying greasy, so I'm just going to show you a small portion of this machine degreasing it with the lacquer thinner, and I just found a different angle that I think might be better, so I'm going to turn this off for a second and move it. This is only going to be a short video, and I don't have a lot of lacquer thinner to use here, so I'm going to have to go to the store in a few minutes and buy some more. But I'm just going to show you a little bit of how lacquer thinner can be a great and quick degreaser. And I'm kind of holding the cup underneath the object I'm degreasing to catch the lacquer thinner as it's falling, because you can reuse it. Even though it may be dirty, you can reuse it, and then once you're through with it, put some clean lacquer thinner in the pot and go over everything again and again till it comes out nice and clean. And as always recommended, work in an opened area, so I have the garage door open. And I'll eventually have a fan going, and I actually should wear gloves because some of this stuff is getting back onto my skin, and you shouldn't let lacquer thinner get on your skin too much, because it can enter the pores of your body and eventually poison you, or just, you know, mess up your skin. So I'm showing you this. And how nice and clean this section of the mechanism is getting. And for the gears, I'll merely use a paintbrush and go across the teeth as much as I can. Now, like I said, I don't want to take this machine apart because it's got a lot of components on here that have to stay in time with the whole mechanism as it's running, and I don't want to take anything apart. Okay, I think you guys get the idea. So I'm going to take this thing apart. I'm going to stop this video. So I think you guys get the idea. So I'm going to stop this video and go to the store and get some more lacquer thinner. This will be a time-consuming project because I'm not taking the mechanism apart. So it's not going to come clean immediately. I'm going to have to keep dipping and keep brushing and keep, cleaning and cleaning and cleaning until I get all the old grease off of this thing. Anyway, this is Amberola 1B signing off for now. I'll show you what the mech will look like after it's all degreased. Okay, now we see the Capehart mechanism all degreased, and it looks a heck of a lot better than it did before. It may not be completely perfect, but at least it does look better. All nice and clean, ready to be re-greased, re-timed, and put back into the cabinet once I get the cabinet here. And can put this all back together and see how it runs now. Now, another thing I'm doing to help restore this Capehart is that I'm replacing all the soldering joints to the connectors. And this one that I'm going to do here is of the drive motor. And I've got the connectors in this little portable vise. And even though they look like they're solid, some of the connections I've noticed that have had wires, strands of wire, kind of like clipped off or just, tore off over years of removing the connections and resoldering or reconnecting them. And so I'm just going to demonstrate what I'm going to do here to redo the connections the proper way. So I'm going to stop this and put a little more light on the subject because I need to see what I'm doing. This is a little better close-up of the wiring harness here. As you can see, some of the wires the strands of wire have frayed off, and you can see some of them here and here. And I am going to resolder these. Now, I'm going to unsolder all 4 wires at once, but before I did, I took a silver paint pen and I marked each wire 1, 2, 3, and 4 with 4, 3, 2, and 1 little dots on the wire, so I'll know which little connection they specifically go to. Okay. So now I'm going to work on unsoldering all the wires. It's always good to have a clean connection on your soldering tip. And if you have to, kind of like rub the tip against the old solder to kind of like wear through the old connection and to make a new one so you can get the heat through there. There we go. Now these connections are coming off too easily, which leads me to believe that they wouldn't have lasted too long if they had stayed connected. You see there's still some wire on that one, but some of the other ones like this one, there's hardly anything there and all the wire must be still on the connection. So then what I'm going to do is to use my solder sucker to try to get most of the old solder off of here and to open up the hole in the connection. And then I'll strip back the wire on the casings and then resolder all these. There we go. Nice new hole. And ejecting the solder from the solder sucker. And I'll work on the second one and the third and the fourth. Got to do that one again. That's better. And when you push in on the plunger again after taking off some solder, it actually ejects the solder from the inside of the sucker so that you'll have a clean hose again. Ah, missed. Get that a little bit better. Let me see. That one's being a little bit stubborn. There we go, kind of came out by itself. Okay, now I'm just going to cut off these ends here. Okay, and it's okay if I strip off a little bit of the little marking I made because I can see which one it is already. So this is number 1. I'm going to twist these. Get this a little bit closer. And I'm just going to fold that over. Take my solder. Put a nice clean tip on this. And I've noticed that sometimes the solder hasn't taken first time around, so I use some of this liquid solder flux because these things have been dirty and greasy, so I'll just put a little flux on there just to kind of clean the connection, and then I'll put a new bead of solder on there. It may take some soldering because it's got to fill in the hole as well as cover the connector. There. I'll just let that cool. And blowing on it won't hurt it either. Now I got a nice tight connection there, and I'll just continue on to number 2, 3, and 4. Okay, and now I've resoldered all the connection on here, and they're nice and strong. There are no loose strands of wire coming from underneath. The only reason why this is a little loose because when I cleaned out the holes, I actually put the wire through the hole and then folded it over, and then I kind of clipped them off a little bit so that they don't, have to hang there so long. But now I have some freshly soldered connections there. They're all nice and clean. They're stronger and they look a hell of a lot better than they did before. Okay, and the next thing I did to restore the Capehart was to take off all the old felt from the turntable. And to do that, I took my electric drill, my electric hand drill, and I put this little wire wheel, this brass wire wheel on the end of it, and I just merely went over the whole thing at a slight angle to wear off the old felt, and this is how it came out. Now, as I told you earlier on in my previous video, I have this old used felt which has more of a natural color to it. I don't like new felt because it looks too bright and too brand new, so I was able to get this old worn faded felt, and I'm going to put this on the turntable because I think it more matches the felt that's on the hopper, which is the original felt, which I'm going to leave on here. I don't want to change this felt out because I don't want it to look all too new. So what I'm going to do too is, after I cut out a piece of the felt, I'm going to fold it over and then find the center and use this hole punch to punch out the center hole. And then I'm going to apply the felt to the turntable, turn it upside down, and then trim the edges, and it'll look nice and new. So I'm going to stop the video and then I'm going to show you what it looks like after. Okay, I've cut out a piece of the felt and I kind of marked the center where I want to punch out the hole with the silver paint pen. Just a little dot. And what I'm going to do is put the center of the felt in the hole punch, and I'm going to try to zoom in on this. Now the trick is not to put too much of the center hole that you want punched out into the punch, because if you do, you'll get an oblong hole. You just want to barely make it halfway, almost like taking up half of the space of the circle here for the hole. Even if you make the hole a little bit small, it won't matter. It'll just look nice and tight against the turntable. Okay. And then you have a nice round center hole. I'll try to zoom out on that. Like I said, the center hole is a little bit small, but who cares, because it'll fit nice and tightly around the center of the turntable. And now I'm going to glue this down with some contact glue in a spray can, and then I'll get back to you and smooth it out, and then I'm going to trim it. Okay, now that the turntable felt has been applied to the turntable, now I'm going to trim it. Now I've had the best luck trimming turntable felt with it upside down. So I'm just going to merely work into it and follow the very edge. And if I have to make some fine trimming adjustments on it, I will do it with it turned over. Which I'm sure I'll have to. But this is just a rough cut. I usually do my fine trimming after I've gotten the heavy part of the turntable felt off. And of course it's not going to be perfect, but what I'll do is just kind of like start working in from the top, and I'll trim it that way. Okay, now here's the turntable with the felt attached to it, all nice and clean. And what I like is a nice clean edge to it so that you don't see a lot of rippling from rough cutting. And as you can see, when it turns, you don't really see a lot of rippling. And so to me, it's a good clean cut. So there's the turntable all done. Apparently there was some wrinkled finish paint on the edge here, but I'm not going to worry about it. It's done. It looks presentable. and it's got some original old felt on it. So that part of the project is now done.